Welcome to the Podcast Growth Show. Next level thinking on how to increase your podcast subscriber base. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 6 of the Podcast Growth Show. My name is Jürgen Barkessel, your host. Promoting a newly launched podcast with a Facebook contest used to be a very popular podcast marketing tactic. The idea was to launch a contest featuring a relevant giveaway or prize and then boost it with Facebook ads. And to enter the contest, the contestants were asked to subscribe to the show and to leave an iTunes review, and then to email the iTunes name or ID used for the review to the podcast host as proof. And the podcast host would then enter the applicant into the contest drawing. Now, in today's episode, we're going to examine the reason why this strategy is not as popular anymore as it used to be, but also why this podcast marketing strategy might still be a good idea today. Let's talk a little bit about prize selection tips and why they are key for this strategy to work. We're going to go a little bit into a contest structure, the best paid and free contest platforms, and tips for setting up and running these sorts of contests. So iTunes has changed, and the reason the strategy was successful a few years ago was that the new and noteworthy section and that algorithm that drives the ranking was driven by reviews that a podcast would receive during the initial weeks after a launch. And so contests were a great way to get lots of reviews in a short amount of time. But since then, the algorithm to rise to the top of iTunes has changed. It's no longer driven by the number of reviews alone. Instead, at the time of this writing, it's the number of new subscribers that seems to have the most impact, and then followed by the number of episode downloads, and I think reviews might still factor in a little bit, but therefore the reviews really no longer contribute as much to being at the top of the new and noteworthy section. And as I've said elsewhere and in previous episodes, I feel that podcasters in general needlessly obsess about getting into the new and noteworthy section. The reality is that over the last 2 years, iTunes has become a highly competitive space. And given that major popular radio stations have shifted their energies from terrestrial and satellite radio into creating podcasts for themselves as a way to create digital presence, that's created a lot of competition. And there's evidence that being featured in the new and noteworthy typically only yields a few hundred additional subscribers anyway. So podcast marketing through the launch contest method is less common now. And the main reason is that new and noteworthy is so no longer influenced by the number of reviews a podcast gets. So besides not being effective anymore, setting up a launch contest also takes a good deal of time to set up. You need landing pages, marketing automation capability, and some time and money to spend on contest platforms. But if you've got the passion, time, and effort to spare, launch contests will still give your podcast something very valuable and a great boost for the following reasons. Reviews are still important social proof. They shouldn't be ignored. They lend credibility to your podcast. Seeing that dozens of people are leaving positive reviews for a podcast might tip the scale for you to take action and subscribe. If you yourself see a podcast that has no reviews versus one that has, what's your behavior? So I do think that iTunes reviews still matter. And I also think that launching a contest as part of a launch is a good idea for a number of other reasons. Getting reviews is as hard as it ever was. We've seen this play out countless times. People are happy to offer leaving a review, but iTunes doesn't make it particularly straightforward or easy. And so when it comes right down to it, even your best friends and relatives somehow don't ever get around to it without repeat reminders. And contest prize selection is a key component of making this work. and overcoming that. So the selected giveaways don't have to be expensive. It's more important that they're relevant and that they're related, that the prizes are related to your topic, to the topic of your podcast. So for example, a customer experience podcast might have a contest that gives away free tickets to that year's biggest customer experience conference. That beats offering an iPad or an electronic gadget as a prize, simply because otherwise you'll get participants just trying to win an iPad. The more likely people are to care about your topic and to care about the prize, the better they're related, the better a contest would work. Another example might be a podcast about podcasting, like my own growth show, for example. If I was to run a contest for the podcast growth show, I would choose to give away a premium podcast gear package or something like that as the prize. And one prize might not be enough. The multiple prizes actually increase the desirability and the success of your contest because there are better odds and many more ways to win. The most successful contests offer a single grand prize and then sort of a number of secondary prizes in decreasing value. In fact, you should give away something free for everyone entering the contest, almost like a lead magnet. So this could be as simple as a PDF, as long as it's related, again, to your topic and to your focus of your podcast. So coming back to my own example for the podcast growth show, here's how I was thinking about it. This is what I would do if I was planning to do my own contest. My goal would be to attract new podcasters. So I was thinking prize selection for me would focus on thinking about what's relevant for new podcasters. And pretty much every podcaster I know tried to save money during their initial studio setup. Now, they might have gotten a good mic, but where they most likely save money is on their microphone boom arm. And a cheap version of that can be very frustrating to use. It's creaky, it doesn't stay in place, it makes noise, and so it has greater reach. So the newer ones, and a professional model would be a pleasure to use. So that's what I was thinking. First prize, a premium Rode PSA-1 swivel studio mount that's worth about $100. And it really makes a big difference when you start using it versus one of the lesser expensive ones. I was thinking a second prize could be a good dynamic microphone like the Audio-Technica AT 2005. That's about $70. And then I was thinking, well, I've got a podcast marketing course, an SEO course. Why don't I give away 15 entries for that? That's a $90 value. I've got the podcast Bible as an ebook that I could give away. Everyone who enters gets access to my podcasting resources guide, which is a very popular giveaway that I feature on my site anyway. So let's talk a little bit about content structure. As I previously mentioned, people are sort of overly focused into getting into iTunes and getting iTunes reviews, but that doesn't have to be the only focus anymore for a contest. For me, it's important to attract the right sort of listener to subscribe to my podcast through email notifications. That's my biggest gain. And so my focus would be to get them to subscribe to my show via email. Also, I have a YouTube channel, so I have lots of cool how-to videos there. So I would ask them to like my YouTube channel and my Facebook page. I have a Facebook podcast marketing group to join. And then lastly, I would say, leave an iTunes review. So these would be, the multiple actions to take in order to enter the contest. And you might think that, that's a lot to ask people to do multiple things. But here's the thing: the Clever Contest set it up so that each action that you take creates more entries and increases the likelihood to be able to win. So the logic is that, you must subscribe to my email list because otherwise I can't send you the prize and communicate with you. But if you complete additional steps, like liking my YouTube channel and the other things, those enter you into the contest additional times, and that greatly increases your chance of winning one or more of these prizes. And The other clever thing that I really like about this concept is that each is weighted differently. So for example, subscribing to my YouTube channel might be worth an additional 5 entries, but if you actually leave an iTunes review, I'll enter you 25 more times into the contest, and that increases, makes it a no-brainer almost, to enter the contest. And it gets you to do the hardest thing, which is leaving the iTunes review, because that's worth so much more than, just subscribing or downloading something. So later in the podcast, I'm exploring some of the differences between the do-it-yourself platforms and the do-it-yourself ways of doing this versus some of the professional platforms, because these multiple actions that you can take are possible really only on the paid contest platform. So that's why they are a good idea. So I've got a great example from a company called SERP. And I'm going to do a quick demo of what that looks like for them. So in this quick section and demo, I wanted to go through an example. This isn't a podcast-specific example, but this is an example of a contest giveaway by a company called SERP, who give away photo gear, and me being a big photography fan, I actually entered this. And so I just thought I'd share how they set this up and what some of the clever ways are in which these contests function. So ahead of time, apologies if some of this is a visual reference, but if you go to our show notes at podcastgrowthshow.com/E6 for episode 6, that's where you'll see the little video and graphics that basically explain this. But what we're looking at here is a simple contest landing page that the Facebook traffic or other ad traffic gets sent to. And here is the description of what you can win. Underneath it is, there's some images here. Underneath it are a list of the prizes. There are multiple prizes. The way that SERP is structuring this particular giveaways is that they are setting up one prize that people can win every week during an entire month. So that's an interesting way to keep interest alive during a month-long campaign, so people aren't sitting there waiting for a drawing to happen at the very end of this campaign, but there's one giveaway every week, and people might be more interested in staying tuned to that. And then on the very bottom are the different ways to enter this contest. And as you can see, the first way is to sign up for their newsletter, visiting them on Instagram, subscribing to their channel, on YouTube, watching a video. There are a number of different activities that then enter you into the contest. And the clever thing with Gleam is that you can enter a contest multiple times. And so this means that in a podcast situation, for example, you get, for example, a single entry for subscribing to the show via email, but you might get 25 entries into the contest for leaving an iTunes review. So that sort of makes it a no-brainer to incentivize people, for people to actually leave you a review on iTunes. And I think that's a very clever aspect of the Gleam platform and the way that these contests are structured there. So that's how SERP did it. Now, a question is, if you're doing this for iTunes, is it necessary to validate that somebody actually left an iTunes review? Unfortunately, I don't know any contest platforms that directly integrate with iTunes and validate that somebody left you a review, but most people will do so if asked, because they're afraid of missing out or being found out if they don't leave you a review and then win the prize. What if they win and you ask them, well, what was the iTunes name that you left a review with before sending them their prize? That's one way. Note that with some of the platforms like Gleam.io, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, there's several easy ways to actually ask a contest entrant a question. For example, you can ask them to send you the iTunes name under which the review was left, and you can validate it that way. Now, if you want to create a contest, you'll need a landing page. There are a few things that you need to be created. A contest landing page is sort of a distraction-free website or page where you can send ad traffic to and where people can learn about and subscribe and sign up for your podcast. You can build these manually, but if you use one of the commercial contest running platforms, you may not need to. Again, we'll discuss that in a minute. They handle the creation of landing pages and the design of them, and they're typically pretty good and straightforward, and some even allow you to create multiple pages and A and B test and manage email workflows and things like that. So Do you really need to A and B test pages? Well, it sort of depends. I think there are people out there that have tested their contest pages, and you could just piggyback on their likely outcome. So, for example, video, it seems, is very popular, and that makes a page perform better. So you would want to have a video talking about your prize or talking about your contest. And video pages perform better. But do you really need to do exhaustive A and B testing? I guess it depends on how much money you're spending, how long the campaign runs. And for podcasts, I would say you could probably skip it. Well, then the next part is to create a Facebook ad campaign. Once you have the landing page, it's time to boost that landing page on Facebook to send some traffic there. And Facebook marketing in general is kind of a big topic to tackle in this episode, but I have some links in the show notes that have some really good walkthroughs from others, from our friends at Buffer, for example. They've gotten some they've got an interesting long post that walks you through how to set this up in the first place and run it. We also talked about this, so you go to podcastgrowthshow.com/E6 and see those links. And so there are multiple ways in which you can create a Facebook ad. You can shoot a quick video. You can do a Facebook Live post. You can pick an image from your podcast giveaway or your contest. You can come up with some fun language and then use that to create a Facebook post and simply boost it. So there are multiple ways of setting that up. It actually turns out to be pretty easy, and there are lots of resources out there that teach you how to do it. Now, how to do it successfully is a bit more tricky, and that's why I'd recommend check out what Buffer is saying, and and also go back and watch our episode. I think it was episode 3, in which we talked about paid podcast platforms. Now, when writing the copy and actually telling people about your contest, we use this little trick called A.I.D.A, which stands for, attention, interest, desire, and action. So attention, you can ask a provocative question in your Facebook ad. Interest, you can expand on that a little bit, an attention-grabbing headline that will pique people's interest and explain the question. And desire, like, what's in it for them? Why should they enter your contest? Well, that's the prize, right? But and then finally, the action is like, please sign up, or here's what you need to do. So coming up with compelling language, typically there's some good examples out there. But the next hurdle sort of is to find the right audience and making sure that your podcast ads are seen by the right audience, because that's really what makes a Facebook campaign successful and affordable versus expensive. So you need to show your ads and your contest to the audience that's most likely and most connected with the topic of your podcast. So in Facebook parlance, it's called audience targeting. If you've never done Facebook ads before, it might seem a little tricky, but basically you're trying to limit the number of people who see your ad to only those interested in your primary topic. And that's not all. The second trick when you're running this for Facebook campaigns is to actually target likely podcast listeners. And you want to make sure that the audience on Facebook that's shown your ads and that you see your ad are likely podcast listeners. That part's a bit harder. We actually have a 5-step process to target likely podcast listeners on Facebook, and that's a downloadable thing that you can get, again, in the show notes. So just go to podcastgrowthshow.com/E6 and you can download this. So assuming that you want to run this, let's talk a little bit about free platforms versus paid contest platforms that professionally do this. Should you use a paid contest platform, or should you try to do this for free? And is there a way to do this for free? Well, there are advantages to using a contest platform out there. And for me, paid platforms are the way to go. It's really not that expensive, and you're going to be spending a little bit of money for Facebook ads likely anyway. So for a relatively low monthly fee, these paid platforms offer some really distinct advantages over a do-it-yourself approach. They integrate with social networks, and what this means is that they actually validate that somebody did what you asked them to do, like a Facebook page or like your YouTube channel. And all of this before they get entered into the contest. So they take care of that sort of checkup part of it. And most paid platforms also feature the ability to set up landing pages for you much more quickly. I don't have to create a lot of fancy landing pages with my page builders. I'm geeky. I enjoy doing that, but still, it just saves a lot of time going with one of these platforms when they have some ready-to-go landing pages already. It saves you from having to create your own email funnels. Some of them have A and B testing built in, and so it's just a really good, it's just a really good option to go with some of these platforms. What are they? I'll mention 4 here. Rafflecopter is one of the most affordable platforms out there. They have sort of a free plan, trials for the most advanced plans that are starting at about $13 a month at the time of this podcast. And they're easy platform to start with, but they're also pretty basic, and they lack some of the more innovative features of some of the other platforms out there. And that brings us to Gleam.io. Gleam.io, I really like this platform. It's smart and it's flexible, and it rewards people to take multiple actions to promote you while entering your contest, which I think is kind of genius. So that increases the viral potential of your podcast marketing launch contest. And after having reviewed about 10 different contest management platforms, Gleam has emerged as my own personal favorite. It's not the least expensive. The Pro plan is about $45 a month. But still, I think that if you sign up for 2 months, it's pretty affordable. UpViral is another good alternative. In fact, if Gleam is too expensive, that might be a one to check out. They have email integration, setting goals, and providing incentive and rewards. And, they sort of keep your contest entrance on track by sending follow-up emails and so forth. They've got an example case study on their site about how they launched their own podcast with this, and they got about 7,000 contest entries, 450 leads, and 50 plus reviews on iTunes from a short campaign that they ran. Another platform is called Contest Domination. Again, links in the show notes, podcastgrowshow.com/E6. This one runs about $100 a month, but what's different about them is you can just sign up for $100 for one campaign and run it for as long as you want with all of the features. Some of the other platforms restrict the amount of features available in their basic plan. So, that's the one reason that, that might work out. Anyway, to summarize contest platforms, I personally feel that Gleam is the one to go with. It's the most innovative platform to try, and you can expect to perhaps spend $90 for a pro plan and a 2 months campaign. I don't think that's too bad. The more expense comes really from the Facebook ads. I would expect to be paying between $20 and $50 a day for the duration of the campaign. So again, be sure to check out episode 3 on our podcast, Paid Advertising. It was a look behind the scenes and comparing Facebook, Google, and some other ways in which to have paid option for promoting a podcast. But all right. So are there alternatives? Yes. There are some ways in which to do this for free. If you do want to do it free, then, here are some things to keep in mind. To save money on the prizes themselves, for example, you could give away some content or prizes that don't cost you anything, like courseware if you've developed some, or ebooks if you have them, or other content that you already developed and that you can give away. You could use your own email software like MailChimp or Constant Contact or something that drives your email list, or even something free like Yam, which we covered in our podcast guest outreach system. That's a free Gmail-based email platform or email automation platform that you could use to send and manage a contest with. But you'll also have to develop your own landing pages and rely on your own social network then for a free promotion. If you don't want to run Facebook ads, how are you going to get traffic to these pages? If you've got a big email list, maybe that's a way to do it. You can use tools like Go Viral. It's a free platform from Growth Tools, and that also ensures and validates social sharing. It's a great add-on for thank you pages and basically checks that somebody actually shared or liked something in order to enter your giveaway. There's a platform called Giveaway Tools. That's a new contest platform. It's in beta still. It's pretty basic. It integrates with several social platforms so that it can force or guide people through liking your Facebook page. So all of this can theoretically be done for free, but it's still a large investment of your time. And so really in the end, for me, it comes down to, that a zero cost and do-it-yourself is not as likely to succeed, and that you're spending a lot of time anyway. So, is it worth it to spend all this time when the effectiveness of this might not be there in the end? So for me, the conclusion is that of the whole contest strategy, I think it's a good idea. Apart from getting iTunes reviews, contest, with the right prizes and incentives can quickly add a ton of visibility and email subscribers to your podcast, which is more meaningful for me anyway. I love getting email subscribers. And why it no longer gets you reliably into the new and noteworthy section, maybe the way that this was 2 years ago or so. I think that having great reviews on your podcast homepage is still social proof and lends credibility to your podcast. So I do think it's a permanent asset. And if you should decide running a marketing contest, I recommend using a paid contest platform like Gleam.io, because it will save you a ton of time and effort. That's it for today. Signing off for now, Jürgen from the Podcast Growth Show. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Podcast Growth Show. Visit us at podcastgrowthshow.com and download your podcasting resources guide.